This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business, MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional life that you're happy with. On this episode, I speak with Foster alum Austin Morton. I was really excited to talk with Austin because of the career path that he's been on. Coming into the program, I worked with him as his first-year career coach, and he knew the direction he wanted to go in, a career in sustainability. It's an area that interests me, so it was fun to work with him on his career plans and job search, and fun to catch up with him about 2 years after he graduated from Foster to hear how it's going. One note about the recording. Since this conversation did take place while we're still working from home because of the pandemic, you'll hear Austin's baby in the background. I hope you'll enjoy my conversation on careers and professional life with Austin Morton. My guest today is Austin Morton. He graduated from the Foster MBA program in 2019. And before coming to the program, Austin worked in the sustainability and environmental space in a communications role or a series of communication roles, and came into the program with a clear interest in pursuing a post-MBA career that was related to sustainability. I really wanted to have him on the program because he's got some great experiences from his time in the program through to what he's doing now, and I wanted him to be able to share that with my listeners. Austin Morton, welcome to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life.
Thank you, Gregory. Nice to be here.
So I'd love for you to tell your journey to where you are now.
Yeah, I guess it started in 2009. I graduated from my undergraduate degree at the University of Washington. I had gotten a dual degree in political science and international relations. And honestly, it was the middle of the 2009 recession. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do and found myself in an international development consultancy. So, immediately I was in a comms role in international development, just kind of feeling my way around. I worked on whatever projects I could around international development, and I sort of started focusing on natural resources and energy programs. That's where I was most passionate. But like often, how international development consulting works is you bid on you get a bid from a development agency. You work to craft in business development. You work on the pricing and the solution and what kind of who recruitment, like who to bring in for. So I kind of sat in that business development space and advised projects from sort of like inception of the RFP all the way through winning the work and then executing through various projects and regions around the world. So that's what's kind of my first taste of how to do business, but it was related to a single client, right? Like the US federal government at the US Agency for International Development. But I spent about 5 years in that world, got to travel around a lot. I worked on supporting projects in Kyrgyzstan and Lebanon. I got to travel there. I did shorter term assignments in Vietnam and Nairobi in Kenya. And it was all kind of around community development and then natural resources. So that kind of space, thinking about where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about, was really around helping improve environmental performance and helping communities sort of conserve better or find sustainable livelihoods, right, through better agricultural practices or forest conservation and things. So when I got the chance to work on climate adaptation mitigation program, right, I kind of dove directly into that, went all in on kind of helping that policy framework, and soon got the opportunity to go work at the World Resources Institute, which is sort of the premier environmental think tank. They were standing up a new project called the New Climate Economy, basically coming up with the economic arguments for embracing climate action. This is in like 2014. And at that time in 2014, everyone was focused around the costs of climate action and not so much what are the benefits, right? Like what are the straight economic gains from pursuing climate action. So that's what my work for 3 years focused on, was cataloging and communicating, right, the success stories of governments and businesses around the world, and addressing low carbon pathways in cities, land use, and energy. So I did that for 3 years. I actually got to go to the Paris Climate Accords and support my project there for a time. And we launched at the UN. The UN Secretary General joined. We had the Bank of America CEO like come to our findings and show how all of these low carbon pathways are possible and viable. And it was a great kind of career moment. But when I kind of sat back to think about what I wanted to do and all these engagements that we had, be it governors of states in the US, former presidents of countries, they're all saying that the business models weren't there. They wish they had good business partners. So that's why I went back to get my MBA because I was like, oh, I'm now now we don't have enough business partners. I'm going to go help come up with the business models to support these low carbon pathways that everyone says are viable, but always seem to be just out of reach, right?
You decided to get an MBA because you wanted to be one of these business leaders making the business case from the inside and making the decisions that would move companies in these directions, it sounds like.
Yes, I think in general, right, there's a certain skill set you need to do change management at an organization. It's much like that we're not going to reinvent every business overnight, right? And I think there's some in the environmental space that don't want to deal with capitalism at all, and they think, we can just regulate our way to every solution, right? And I never found that particularly viable or attractive. And so I really think it is about learning how learning how to make this attractive to shareholders, right? Making good products, knowing product management, knowing the finances and managerial accounting aspects of how to build different types and more sustainable types of products. So that's what I went back to the MBA to do. Yeah. And leadership, sure. I do think leadership is important, but for me, it was also just recognizing that I needed a different skill set base. Not even that I was going to come in and lead an organization towards change. It was me personally, like I needed to know how to read a balance sheet and convince financial stakeholders at companies that are often the ones holding the pens, supply chains and supply chain managers and financial managers are normally the ones saying that, you can't take these sustainable actions. So I wanted to be able to speak their language, convince them that these were actually good things to do for business.
So you graduated a little bit less than 2 years ago. And what are you doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So out of my MBA, I went and actually did another internship directly out of my second year. So I went to go be an EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, Climate Corps Fellow. Basically, what that program is you learn all these sustainability tactics and how to do a greenhouse gas accounting framework for a company, and then you go into over the summer, you go to that company or organization and you help them map their greenhouse gas emissions and identify solutions that can reduce those emissions. So that's what I did for a company called CLEAResult. It's an energy efficiency firm that was owned by TPG Rise Fund, which is like a large ESG fund. So they were very interested in not only the potential of CLEAResult to lower greenhouse gas emissions for clients and utilities, but also to put that training on back on the organization itself. So had a happy summer in Portland doing all that work, mapped the greenhouse gas emissions, and then sort of came up with a series of recommendations for their emissions that they own and operate to be reduced, and then sort of starting to look at their broader supply chain, what they should do. And one of those things was their transportation fleet. So that was most of their operational emissions. So basically, at the end of that fellowship, I was offered a job to come back at ClearResult working on their electrification space. So broadly, electrification is a pathway to reduce emissions in transportation or homes or buildings because very often, you can electrify things with power resources that are a lower emissions profile than fossil fuels. So
Basically, could be hydro here in the Northwest, solar, wind,
exactly,
geothermal.
precisely, right? And so it's about how to power these, buildings and appliances with, those more renewable resources rather than the traditional fossil fuels. And typically this requires batteries and such. So I worked for a year and a half at ClearResult, sort of doing home home building retrofits, kind of trying to get utility programs running for heat pump water heaters and things of that nature that would lower home emissions. But got a great opportunity to work on a series of EV charging programs in the Southwest and in the West.
Electric vehicle charging
Yes,
programs.
electric vehicle charging programs, mainly in the commercial space. So not so much in people's homes, but going to a workplace or an apartment complex and having those kind of clients see the benefit for adding EV stations. So I did a series of big pricing analyses. We ran some pretty big RFPs to get a sense of the market economics for a site. If they wanted, if they needed 3 chargers of a certain type, how much could that cost the client, right? This space is still very early, so those prices are hard to determine. So I ran a big project to figure that out for them. And at the end of that project, I had this kind of interesting or fairly unique experience in the space, and I got an opportunity to interview with a fleet management company. So, the companies that tend to outsource, their vehicle management. There are these large FMCs throughout the world that do that on behalf of companies, and they're now keenly interested in the EV space, right? And one of the pain points or the things that the FMCs know least is the charging that's accompanying all of these electric vehicle purchases and rollouts, right? So I recently joined an FMC to help them navigate this space based on my past 18 months outside of the MBA program.
And while you were in the MBA program, you had some good experiences. I mean, your internship, but then you were also involved in some business plan competitions and things of that nature. Could you describe that a little bit? So your experience in the
Mhm.
program?
Sure. Yeah. I came in as a someone with government project implementation experience and nonprofit communication experience. So it was one of those non-traditional pathways. So really what I identify as my gaps and what I needed to use the MBA program at Foster to fill, right? Were things like, well, I didn't know very much about finance. I knew a lot about literature reviews and studies on how finance can be applied to the climate mitigation space, but I didn't really know too much about how to go do corporate finance. So I've decided in my program to focus on, finance, product management, and then project management, where it was possible to do in the voluntary courses. But another kind of key component of that I realized is like, at least in my background, right, which was big on government and nonprofits, is that I needed to prove that I could conceive a business plan and sort of compete against those who have also had business plans before and show that I can hold my own and win something. So I joined a series of startup, student startup ideas at the Alaska Environmental Challenge. We competed in that in two different startup ideas. One was something called Biopots, which was using an organic paper product to replace the plastic trays used in greenhouses and gardening. That actually won first place. It was a great experience working with the undergrads at over at the paper engineering school. It was really a good time, and they just knew so much about this material science program that I had zero idea, but I came in with sort of the finance and marketing and scoping that sort of like how would we operationalize, right? Substituting plastics with paper products. Went off and interviewed like a series of greenhouses around the city and sort of identified the customer journey that would be responsible for that. And together, with their spunk and my MBA know-how, we managed to win first place on that. But more critical to my current work, I was working on like a battery startup idea with a chemical engineering student and 2 other MBA students actually. We got like I think third place in the business plan competition for that, and it was around sort of monitoring the health of bus batteries and for second life applications. So this is a deep cut, but like normally when these EV buses, these electric buses, you stop using their original battery when it still has 80% of its life left, just because its charge and discharge rates start to become suboptimal, but there's still plenty of like kick in that battery. So it's what to do with it and how to manage the health of it. That actually ended up being super critical to my current work, right? At the time, it didn't seem that way. It just seemed like a cool idea that I was pursuing to prove a point that I could create a business plan. But that's one of those happy accidents I think you get from being at Foster and just kind of jumping in at every opportunity.
Yeah, and you took those opportunities. I remember talking to you as your career coach about really pursuing a variety of opportunities and building out some of those skills, as you mentioned, that you felt like you needed to compete in the job market. And I think that a lot of students who have either that non-traditional background or a non-traditional path that they want to go into make good use of some of these extracurricular activities like the Alaska Airlines Innovation Challenge or the Dempsey Startup Competition and
Mhm.
some of the others out there that are associated with the Burke Center, for example. And I'll put links in the show notes to all of these so that listeners can follow up if they're interested. What would you say from your experience in the MBA program has been, well, this is a two-part question. What from your experience in the MBA program has been most helpful in your career after the program? And then what from your experience with career management, the most instrumental activity or set of activities that helped you with finding these opportunities and securing them?
Mm. So, you know, I think the most important thing that Foster offered me for not from a, coming from a non-traditional background is that I was able to gain enough skills and like take the right amount of courses that help me make better decisions, right? In the absence of complete information. Sometimes with I'm thinking specifically about problems in corporate finance, taking Hillier's like spreadsheet modeling class. Like I was a middling student at best in all of these classes, but the harder and more difficult ones have been the ones that have helped me the most in my sustainability career because sustainability is not a very clear cut industry. You're typically solving problems that are opaque, that have low stakeholder prominence in the sense that you're often explaining the problems to upper level executives over and over. They often don't have a lot of background in it yourself, so you end up being a communicator, a marketer, a financier, a product manager. You end up being like all the roles together when in the sustainability space because you just need to wear every hat. It is truly one of those. It's actually a great spot for an MBA student to be like a problem solving MBA student to be because there are just so many matrix cross-cutting problems that you have to solve for. So I know that's not a great answer in the sense that it's hard to name one thing, right, Gregory? That
Yeah.
right, but it's really the package. It's a suite of package, and knowing, and then being allowed to commit right to the pathway, and that's sort of I think what career management was, helped me the most. It was just sort of like an openness to allowing me to experiment, I guess. I didn't really feel super pressured to get in line and get a job that was coming I didn't feel pressured necessarily to take a job that was coming from the people coming onto campus. I was allowed to you all were very encouraging about going out to find those opportunities, whether it be at NetImpact or going to Boulder to take a stab at sustainable food business opportunities. Like just kind of casting a wider net, even when it was unsuccessful, but still being supportive of that was appreciated.
Yeah, I should say this, you're actually a return guest because you were on an episode earlier talking about MBArk,
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
to Boulder and the Expo West conference.
that was great, by the
With
way. If it, I don't know if anyone who's interested in food would listen to the EV guy, but that was truly a great conference, and I hope others, if they're interested in food, that definitely should go to those.
and I'll put links to that episode as well as that conference and organization MBArk, that's MBARK, in the show notes. What I heard you say, though, was that the space you're in is filled with ambiguity. And the MBA program at Foster really gave you a set of tools and skills and helped you build the confidence to tackle these kinds of ambiguous problems.
Yes,
Is that a fair characterization?
yes, 100%. That was sort of always the pull, right, to sustainability. And I feel quite quite competent, honestly, in kind of solving these issues and identifying them and proposing solutions. And I draw heavily on the MBA program. It's certainly been informed by my past work, right? Like in the space, but increasingly, the more I'm in my current role, I just find myself thinking back to past coursework, or like I've even done some of the quantitative modeling from Hilliard's class to solve scheduling problems. Like that's not an exaggeration. Those are very tangible, helpful things.
So let's drill into what you're doing right now in this EV fleet management space. What do you think are some of the real opportunities for growth in this space, and maybe opportunities tangential to it for MBAs looking for jobs or internships?
Mhm. Yeah, I guess the first thing I'd say is that electrification is very real. It is not an environmental fancy or good to have, right? This is the economics are clear. So it's not just electric vehicles per se, but this is definitely a space that best highlights that the technology is superior to what exists today in terms of electric vehicles will be cheaper and frankly more fun to drive than their ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle alternatives. And you will save money in the very near future, if not already, by converting to an electric vehicle. And that's just like the basic fundamental commercial reality. So, when you think about that, when it's sort of like an industry's time has come, right, for not only on the commercial side, but also because Europe, China, and US and Canada have decided its time has come, right, right? Like these markets are moving with public policy support as well. So things move extremely fast, right? So what opportunities does that offer an MBA? Well, a person who's good at dealing with ambiguity and coming up with a business plan quickly will have a lot of success. A person who understands the dynamics of how public policy can drive markets will also have a success. Like basically, I have to brief my superiors and all the way up to the CEO like once a quarter on what the heck is happening and why is it happening so fast, right? In the EV space, and it's just a blast. So I think those kind of combinations are great. Ideally, in the clean tech space, normally that you have some kind of engineering background, and I still feel that pressure sometimes. Like, so I think MBAs who are looking for a role in sustainability that have an engineering background or something like that they can pull to that like concrete material engineering, that's usually very attractive as well.
And so there's electric vehicles. So there's the vehicle manufacturers, there's battery companies, there's the charging infrastructure. So there's like a real estate component to that.
Hmm.
There's then electrification in buildings and homes. So replacing heat, fossil fuel heat sources with electric heat sources, hot water heating, and cooking gas, right? Replacing
Yeah.
cooking gas, which we're seeing move very quickly, again, from a policy standpoint, right? That, municipalities and even states are talking about like banning natural gas for cooking in residential homes in, the present and near future. So there's all these parts of the industry, and there's not going to be the big five tech companies that a lot of people think about when they come into business school, right? It might be smaller startups that are doing interesting things. It might be real estate companies or real estate management companies that are doing things around electrification, right? And then
Hmm.
the automobile companies, which are now finally, it seems like, the big ones coming around to it. And then you have the upstarts, the Teslas and Rivians and things of that nature.
Right.
They're also looking at it. But there's also potentially like shipping, right? There's some of these large shipping companies are talking about moving towards cleaner fuels, maybe not electric, but cleaner fuels. And then in Washington State, we have the Washington State ferries, which is turned some of the ferries into electric drive
Yeah.
ferries, right? So there's a lot of, if you think expansively, right, there are a lot of ways to start thinking about where the opportunities are in this, just when we think about this one thing, electrification.
Yeah. No, it's very much like who owns the assets, right? Like in normal, like it's often not the most famous companies that actually own the vehicles or own the property or own the sort of supply chain network. And if you want to get into sustainability, you can go a level deeper and find those opportunities. Yes, I would 100% agree with that. Though I think every tech company here in Seattle understands the opportunities, at least not just from the computational like opportunity to host cloud servers, right? For every
Right.
utility that has to then go program demand response programs based off of a billion batteries running around, a billion vehicle batteries and how they play into the grid every day. Like that's going to be a huge tech opportunity. And I think they all understand that intuitively. Yeah.
Right. And we look at you can kind of, I don't know if you'd say look at the value chain, but it's almost like a supply chain issue, right? Because the Amazons, the Microsofts, et cetera, they have fleets that they manage. They have property that they manage. They have
Hmm.
parking that they manage where they might need electric vehicle charging because their employees may, have charging. So you can kind of look into any of these companies and start to find that place where it touches on a sustainability issue. In this case, related to energy, but it could also be, waste management or other resource uses.
Yeah, I would say they're all fairly intertwined when you start thinking of one, right? When you start thinking of the supply chain impacts of your energy, right, and maybe where you're getting your battery from, right? Then it easily switches over to social considerations of the mining practices in the areas your battery manufacturer is getting that ore. So it quickly becomes just a wider exercise, and that's something I found too is from all my time before the MBA and after working in sustainability. So it's I feel like how quickly you could be talking about one thing and then it quickly becomes a strategic importance in a whole other space. The interplay is fairly significant.
What advice do you have to people who might be considering an MBA or who have started their MBA who really want to work in a sustainability field, impact field? Specifically, I'd say like the advice you'd have about approaching the preparation and the finding the opportunities and the pursuing and, in your case, staying really focused on what you wanted in the end goal. What would you tell a student who's just about to come into the program?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to stick to your guns. If you're always feeling if you're most passionate, right, about sustainability, or having an impact with your career over the particular trajectory, you just have to be comfortable knowing that that's a harder path, and there won't be as many opportunities that come on campus. And some of your colleagues and friends will get opportunities quicker for their internships and their final jobs. So you just got to like make sure that you're not feeling too lonely or put down by that. You have to just know that you're in it for this longer haul, these just in time kind of job opportunities. I've gotten asked that a couple times. That's always the first thing I say is, it was kind of lonely. It is a little bit harder to go in the sustainability space because there aren't there are like jobs across the asset classes that like we just discussed, but it's not like a recruiter needs 20 positions at one company and then they go, okay, let's go to Foster to get them. Yeah, so that's the first.
So what you're saying is that, if you want to be a product manager in tech, like you look at 10 tech companies, they're hiring hundreds of product managers. There's a lot of opportunity. But if you want to be a sustainable supply chain person or some other role, let's say in sustainability, there's like one in each of those companies. So to have the same number of opportunities, you have to vastly expand the number of companies that you're looking at, essentially.
Exactly, right. They're not gonna, I think there's twofold to that. One is that there's normally one or two, except if you're Amazon, you're suddenly hiring like 20, 30, 40, 50. It would be good for them. But typically then you have to go out and find them too, right? You can't like career management, you get like everyone's doing the best they can, but you just can't find one position across 100 companies, right, and bring that
Right.
that or company to campus. So I think it's being comfortable and start shopping early. Like that's the biggest thing, that just go out and start talking to companies and going to conferences immediately, I would say. Don't wait for March or February of your first year.
Yeah, so build that network. There's a great saying: "Don't wait till you're thirsty to dig the well."
I hadn't heard of that, but that's exactly right. Yeah, in this
Nice.
space. Yeah, I had some benefit because I was coming into it, right, from a fairly good network from my time in DC and then various jobs I had had beforehand that I knew kind of the players and who I wanted to talk to, but especially if you're coming in fresh, like you simply just have to start talking to people as soon as possible and then just start finding those either volunteer or MBA internship opportunities that'll help you build some experience in the space.
Okay, so that's sort of the first piece of advice you'd have. So it's sort of stick to your plan and get started early. So advice piece number one and number two. Is there another thing that you'd say from being on the other side of this?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is sustainability space is maturing in the sense that you don't like niche knowledge is important. Like knowing greenhouse gas accounting is important. There are very specialized knowledge pieces that could be useful, but the clean tech space is maturing. Sustainability itself is as a business concept is maturing. So often you just if you want to be a product manager, if you're a product manager and your background's product management, there are impact companies that need product managers, and you can work in this space now. You can be in finance at a solar power company, right? You can uh, go work and this is true for the electric vehicle companies. I saw like Rivian is a very interesting startup. They were hiring for a bunch of positions. They were hiring for like knowledge management senior product managers whose entire job is to catalog the change that an electric vehicle is and how their systems are different, right? Like you're talking like tons of jobs and specializations that have been generalized normally that are now part of this new industry. So I think that's the other part of it too is that the cake is bigger and everyone can have a slice of it, whereas it used to be like, oh, if you didn't have 10 years of experience and got your PhD from Zurich, like no one wanted to talk to you about sustainability, right? But that's very different now. So I think you can take your shot is probably the other side of it.
Right. So sort of general roles like product manager, finance, maybe FP&A or corporate finance, customer success, account management, et cetera, all that stuff at a company that is doing the green sustainable thing,
Hmm.
or maybe the full life cycle accounting person with that specialty going into a company that's just kind of business as usual, but now needs to consider sustainability because maybe there's increasing consumer pressure or board pressure or investor pressure on like, hey, what are you doing about the fact that your supply chain, is wasteful and dirty or something like that? Or what are
Yeah.
you doing about your greenhouse gases? So you go into that company that is not a sustainability company, but you are doing something that's making it more sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are broadly the two tracks. Normally that second, what we were talking about in the ladder, where you come into a big company and there's this sustainability role, those are you're actually probably going to compete with someone internal for that role. So that's kind of another like, insider detailed career management advice is normally those ones there's like an inside track that always have to compete against, right? So it's just,
Yeah, we say get your foot in the door
and then convert.
and then migrate over to the sustainability role that you want to be in.
And there have been a bunch of, I'm sure you could draw on a number of experiences of people.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the cohort before me and my cohort have been doing that. Yeah, that's definitely one way to do it. I was always just too impatient to do that. Like I just knew I wanted to do it from my first, paycheck out of the MBA program. But
Yeah.
that's probably the best way to do it. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up that impatience because I think at the same time you were very patient, right? Because you went after the things that you really wanted rather than jumping for something that wasn't quite right. Even after graduating, you decided to do the EDF Climate Corps fellowship
Hmm.
when everyone's trying to lock down that full-time role, and that was just a fellowship. What was that like thinking about that?
Yeah, I think that's the basis of my recommendation to be patient and trust yourself, right? Like I think I had to decide to take that in February or March. I can't remember now. And I was starting to get Not, oh, I mean, like I was frustrated that I couldn't find like the full-time role that I wanted and decided that, that was really when I was double downed, right? Like I was like, okay, I know I want to do this. I think I just had this moment where I was just thinking that like from my past work in climate action and whatnot, like I knew what I was passionate about. I knew it was like helping solve climate change problems and thinking about what my daughter is going to have to face in 2080 and 2100. Like that's what motivates me, like what we can do today to stop that. And so, there was a moment there where I was like, okay, maybe I should just try to pivot and get a product manager job because I've been a TA in product management. Maybe I could go get that real quick. But I decided to double down and take that fellowship instead. I think the benefits of that are twofold. One, it gave me some deep experience in the part of the field that I didn't have, which was a corporate sustainability advising project. And then the second was that it gave me more time, still more time, right, to talk and to talk to people and wait for more just-in-time opportunities to come. And doing that worked out. Like I had two other opportunities, one of which I got, another opportunity that I turned down to take the CLEAResult job, um, just for family reasons, But I had other just-in-time opportunities did come up, right? And I think that was reflecting that both validated my strategy, made me feel good, but then was also speaks to the just-in-time nature of these opportunities and why you have to keep looking and keeping your options open and keep flexible. Like I was always just asking myself, is what I'm doing right now helping me get to the end state that I want? And you just have to keep that in mind.
I think your level of confidence and surety about that definitely contributed to your success. From where I sat, that seemed to be you had a strong commitment. You knew what you wanted, and you kept it in your sights.
Right. Yeah.
As we draw to a close here, we're running out of time. I wanted to see if you had any recommendations about books, podcasts, websites, conferences, organizations that you think people interested in pursuing careers in sustainability after their MBA or during their MBA program should really keep their eyes on?
Yeah. So what's most recent to me in my current role in electric vehicles and sustainability and transportation is there are two organizations that I like pretty much religiously listen to and follow, and that's the Energy Gang. It's a podcast, and so that they just like do deep dives every week, right, on the energy topic of the week, and it's just a great primer. I spent 6 months roughly kind of help bulking up, right, on the background knowledge by listening to that podcast. And then there's an organization called the ACT, Advanced Clean Transportation Organization. It's an industry advocacy group and research group. And they just put on this amazing set of summits where I learned a ton about EVs and how the EV charging work I was doing fit into sustainable transportation. So in my initial role, those would be the two that I definitely would advise people read. And then, go subscribe to Bloomberg Green and Bloomberg Hyperdrive. They're just like it's Bloomberg is one of the best medias. Every MBA should probably be reading it anyway, right? But Bloomberg Green in particular just really hits at everything that's going on in sustainability and corporate sustainability, and it's tied to Bloomberg New Energy Finance (BNEF), which has basically been calling the clean tech revolution and especially clean transportation revolution pretty accurately, probably the most accurately of any group.
Were there any courses that really touched on issues related to sustainability that you took in the program?
Yes, I think you have to take the current sustainability offering for sure, Elizabeth Stearns' classes, because a lot of them are cases, but also guest speakers, and they often bring in sustainability leaders in the Seattle area. So you get this level of exposure that you probably just should have in terms of what they're actually working on locally. But more broadly, like the things that I find most useful, I think I touched on this before, but Jeffrey Schulman's classes in product management and pricing were actually I find myself referencing them all the time. Spreadsheet modeling too. It's if you have an MBA on your resume, people think you know how to model things, so you should go take that class. And investments and all the financial classes. Again, I was a middling student at best, but It's just every sustainability initiative is ultimately going to come down to dollars and cents and then perceived social or corporate benefit. And you can argue the perceived corporate and social benefit through your outside learning, but the cost and pricing components you simply have to be persuasive.
I want to thank you for taking the time. I know it's a busy time. We heard your child in the background, and we are still in pandemic times. Everybody's working from home. I want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation on careers and professional life, and wish you the best of luck, both in parenthood as well as with your current career. And I'm going to be interested and excited to see where it continues to take you.
Thank you, Gregory. I was happy to be here, and it was a lot of fun.
I think there are really two key takeaways from this episode for students interested in pursuing a career in sustainability. First, that there are two main tracks for people who want to pursue work in sustainability: working in a traditional role like finance, marketing, or product management in a company that has sustainability at its focus, or working in a sustainability role in a company that doesn't have a sustainability mission. The second is something that we also heard from Austin Guyette on a recent episode of the podcast focused on his career path in venture capital. And that's the importance of staying focused on your goal. It takes patience, a bit of nerve, and resilience to pursue an MBA career in sustainability, or any custom career search in roles or companies that aren't highly active in recruiting MBAs, or for which there aren't a tremendous number of roles to fill. As always, visit conversationsoncareers.com for complete show notes. Thank you for listening to another episode of Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. I'd love to hear what you think about the podcast. You can email me at gheller@uw.edu. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or classmate.